Welcome to Abundance. You guessed it, a podcast dedicated to all things surrounding dance. I am Kristen.
And I am Hannah, and we are two best friends who are brought together by this art form.
Please join us in 5, 6, 7, 8.
All right, so we're back for another wonderful episode, and today we have the pleasure of welcoming the wonderful Alden LaPaglia, director of Alden Moves Dance Theater, based in Brooklyn, New York. A couple of months ago, I saw her posting online for her need of dancers in her annual Nutcracker. Not only have I now been involved in the Nutcracker, but also was later offered a teaching and administrative position at the studio. Needless to say, after working with Alden very closely, I admire her work, passion, and commitment to her work. So I'm very excited to have her on today, and it will be exciting to learn even more about you, Alden. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, welcome. I'm excited to learn about you. I've heard so many wonderful things so far from Hannah.
Yeah, so starting us off, can you please talk a little bit about where you came from and what brought you to New York City? I know you grew up in Virginia and you studied at Richmond Ballet, and then you got your degree at Goucher College, and you've also done a lot with Luigi. But can you talk about all of these things as well as your performance career and what led you to ending up in Brooklyn?
Sure. So I mean, you got it. I studied ballet at the School of the Richmond Ballet, and coming out of Richmond Ballet, I knew that, I loved to dance and I felt like I was meant to dance, but I was not exactly ballet company material. So I needed to see what else was out there. So I went to Goucher College because they had a double major in ballet and modern dance. And I was not very interested in modern dance. But, I wanted to keep dancing. And what I could do is I could get a double major. My parents were very big on me being marketable, and they wanted me to have a double major. They were not really on board with paying for a dance degree and only a dance degree. And I think that actually has been very, very smart in the long run, because a dance degree doesn't always mean a lot to employers. So I think having that academic degree with the dance degree was really helpful. So I double majored in dance and psychology. And I was really, I followed my interests at school. I tried the business degree in the beginning, but economics was not my thing. I was much more interested in English and history and that kind of thing. So, and psychology was always an interest. So I double majored in dance and psychology. And then along the way, I thought that I was going to audition for dance companies at the end of college, and that would determine whether I continued to dance or whether I went to law school. That was always sort of my backup. I have aunt and an uncle who are a lawyer, really two uncles. And I worked at their law firms, just sort of volunteered as an informal internship during the summers for a few weeks at a time. And it was really fun to shadow them. And I always liked debate. And so, it wasn't something that I had time to pursue in high school, but it was something that I was able to do there. So anyway, suffice to say, I was dancing in college, and we had a Pilates program. And in the Pilates program, I was getting to work on alignment. And because I have a bit of hypermobility in my back and a bit of a sway back, that was something that was really important to me, sort of getting over the hump in my dancing. And in order to continue doing Pilates, because you could only do it, I think you could only do it 3 semesters or something like that, but I needed it. I needed to keep doing it. So I came up with this plan to be marketable. And that was because, if my parents were going to pay for something, I had to take it to my dad and tell him how this is going to make me more marketable. So I proposed to my dad, because Goucher was they needed Pilates instructors. Pilates, it was early, like end of 1999, I guess is when I went to college. So it was early 2000s. And Pilates was very big. And it was hard to get the instructors that they wanted, the ones who had been certified through Romana Krzyzanowska. So they were paying students, well, they weren't paying students. They were giving students scholarships to go and get certified, and then giving them a contract to teach on when they came back. So I was able to get this scholarship where they paid for the program. We paid for all the prereq hours. And then I had a contract to teach for them for 2 years. So I taught 10 hours a week as a senior. And then I taught 32 hours a week the year after I graduated. And I took this to my dad. I have this opportunity, and it's going to make me more marketable because I wouldn't have to also apply to law schools while auditioning for dance companies and like make the decision then if I was going to keep dancing or stop dancing. So I talked them into it. And I started my Pilates certification my junior year. And I did school holidays, basically. I went up for the month over Christmas break, and then again during spring break, and then for the whole summer between my junior and senior year. And so I got time in New York City, and I loved it. And I was mostly doing Pilates, but I was trying some dance classes here in New York, and it was really exciting. And I just felt like that's where I wanted to be. So I moved up I told my parents I wanted to move. My dad was convinced that this was not going to work out. And he was very happy with me at Goucher. So I bought a house in Baltimore and then stayed there for the year after I graduated. Like 2 days after my contract ended at Goucher, I moved up to New York and was there since. And I took, lots of different dance classes, ballet, modern, different styles of modern, trying to figure out where I wanted to sort of set my sights. And the Pilates kind of kept me floating right along so that I could continue doing that, pursuing interests and, dancing for smaller opportunities as they came up. But in the process, people kept saying, do you do musical theater? You have that voice. You have that voice. And I was like, what voice? Do you sing? And because when I teach, I have a bit of a sing-song voice. And so I started doing voice lessons.
I can attest to that. You do.
Yeah, I started doing the voice lessons, and I started auditioning, and before too long, I got a national tour for Bye Bye Birdie, and that was really, I felt like I really sort of fit, that was a good niche for me, but I was very shy vocally. So it took some time to sort of warm up to that and to get into the auditioning groove. But anyway, I did that. And then when I met my husband, I realized that I didn't want to be going out of town all the time. I also wanted a dog. So, so I got all of those things and decided that musical theater was pursuing musical theater was going to be too much because it was going to take me out of town too much. So I was looking for something that would be more stable. And that's how I decided that if I was interested in supporting artists, that having a space was the way to go. And I was already teaching dance classes and I was teaching Pilates, and that was a way to fund a space. And so Hannah sort of knows the rest. I opened a studio and have been doing that ever since. I've been able to do some self-producing, not as much as I anticipated that I would, because COVID sort of jumped in and put things on hiatus for a bit, but we're seeing how it all shakes out. But that is a long winding road to how how I got here.
Yeah, it definitely is, but it's super interesting to hear all your little stepping stones that got you to this place, because of course I see you now all the time in the present, and I know little bits and pieces of your past, but that's cool, you know, to have you talk about how your parents impacted your decisions. I had no idea you were interested in law school at one point. Yeah, it's just it's all super interesting, and Pilates, I feel like, really did shape your life throughout your, you know, adulthood, it seems like. And even to this day, you're very passionate about that.
Yeah, well, I see Pilates as a means of opening doors for people. I think that when it comes to dance training, there are all kinds of teachers out there. It used to be that in order to dance, you had to go to some like dance capital, New York City, dance capital, to train to be able to work. And these days you can train anywhere. But so not everyone, again, in the 70s, everyone was taking from the same teachers because there just weren't that many out there. And so people were getting the same information. And they were working with the same choreographers, and it was a much smaller world. But as everyone, you know, colleges have made dance more accessible to people, and because dance is more accessible, not everyone is getting the same information. It's much more fragmented. So I think that you have people out there, and you know, also there are great things about this, but you know, there's another side of it too. And I guess when choreographers are teaching a lot of master classes and dancers are going there, they're focusing on their performance aspirations, and they're not focused on sort of their finishing school. I mean, I think we come through college, and I don't know that, and that's like if you're doing musical theater, if you're doing modern, I think ballet dancers are not going to college, and, you know, but they are going to a trainee and apprentice programs. Everyone has to go to finishing school. And Luigi's is a wonderful finishing school. Everybody was anyone back in the day, whether they were an actor, a dancer, singer, jazz dancer, modern dancer, ballet dancer, everyone who is anyone went to Luigi's. And the message at Luigi's was to get into the sound. It wasn't do it like me. And I think that, you know, it's training has really changed. And I think that there are too many shortcuts needed in order to learn somebody's style, right? We don't have the time, or people don't dedicate themselves to really studying one style all the time, because, you know, if there's a school, you can do it. But if there isn't a school, then you have to go to master classes. But if you're going to master classes, then you're not going to like those master teachers. And you're sort of like studying for the test versus studying to bring out the artist in yourself. And I think that anybody who can find a teacher choreographer who has, I mean, it didn't Valentine say that, but first to school, technically, I think Lincoln Kirstein might have said it, but it's, you know, it's credited to them. In order to be the instrument, you have to have the voice. You have to know the voice. You have to understand the voice, and the voice has to merge with your own, because otherwise it's not an authentic voice. And if it's not authentic, it doesn't achieve art. So I think I think back in the day, it was easier to do that because people were all going to the same teachers and speaking the same language. So they were going to auditions, and like, you know, you sort of knew what was expected of you. And these days dancers have to do everything. Used to be the triple threat was dancer, singer, actor. And now it's like hip hop dancer, modern dancer, ballet dancer, or something like that. I just think, and you know, there's so many different types of triple threats. And then you have all these versions of contemporary dance. Contemporary dance to me is a blending of styles, a blending of many different styles. And so it can be anything, because you can have the African and the modern, and you can have the ballet and the jazz, and you can have, you know, belly dancing and modern dance. I mean, it can be anything, and all of those things can be so different. So again, I think everybody sort of uses these terms differently. But anyway, that is, I think I've wandered away from where we started.
That's okay. It's also wonderful to hear, Alden. And I'm curious, so your logo for your studio is Dancers Leap Ahead One Step at a Time. And it honestly, I feel like kind of mirrors the timeline and the way you're describing your own life. And like Hannah said, each stepping stone that has led you to where you are today. So I'm just curious, like, if that's kind of what you meant by this, or kind of just elaborate on your mission statement a little bit.
Well, actually, so that's for the studio. That's not for the company.
Okay.
So they're two separate, in my mind, there are two separate entities, but they're the same entity. It just, they have two different identities, and yet they're very like mixed. So the school is Leap Ahead One Step at a Time, but the company is Making Movement Dance, Making Dance Move. And I think all of those things are connected. So I guess we started the other discussion with sort of how Pilates has influenced things. And I think that when you're studying style, you're not studying your body, and you're not studying those things that maybe set the foundation for you to be a sponge that soaks up everything that the choreographer needs you to do. And I think that there are no shortcuts. There's somebody, I don't know who said this quote, but the elevator to success is out of order. You'll have to take the stairs one step at a time. And I think that that's very true of any kind of training, because you can build and build and build and build and build, and maybe the foundation is a little off, or maybe it's a little unstable, but you can get here, and you get to the top, and you're on really solid ground. And then people who train and work out, they talk about plateauing. Well, I think the reason they plateau is because there's some fundamental principle that's just like a teeny tiny bit off. And if you can go back, once you get to the top, the way to go higher is to go back to the bottom and or back to the beginning and start again, and keep building and keep refining and keep going. And when you do that, there is no top, like there is no ceiling. You can just keep going. So I think that, you know, for me, movement wise, you take a student who, you go to some schools, teachers show movement, and everybody can, you know, do the movement. And some of those kids who do the movement well or better than others get more attention, right? Because that's what happens in the larger schools, because not everybody is going to dance. And so some teachers in a large class choose to focus on the dancers who they think, you know, are going to dance and who can do it. And I think that my Pilates background tells me that it's not about talent, that it's not, or that talent is not just facility, that it is about strength, it's about flexibility, it's about balance and coordination, and all of these things. And these are all skills that can improve. And so if you can train these skills, again, you know, one block at a time, adding them in it with a really solid sound foundation, then the sky is the limit, and you can always work with your body. So in that sense, with the studio, that is very much how we approach things, is that we will build and maybe take some of these fundamentals, spend more time on the fundamentals. You know, I follow a very classical syllabus, but I do my own things within that syllabus, because we do exercises in a dance class, right? You're not everything is a performance. And if you do it like it's a performance, you are sort of glossing over the work. if that makes sense. And the work is the way you shape your instrument. And that's really what we are doing. I like students to understand that a dancer's body is built. It is not something you are born with. Yes, there are people who are more naturally flexible than others. There are people who, have different body proportions in terms of torso to legs to arms and whatnot. But the thing that Pilates taught me is that it's about being strong and it's about being flexible, and all of this stuff is attainable. It's not something you'll never have just because you don't look a certain way or because you can't do it right away. Maybe you have to work harder, but it's still available to you. And I think that many of the people who keep dancing, we start when we're kids and we dance, and you lose people along the way, especially when they hit like middle school and then high school, because the demands on their time get greater and greater, and something's got to give. So not everybody is going to try to dance professionally, but you have to believe you can do it. So things have to be easy enough along the way for you, and you have to be successful enough that you believe that you can do it. But you also have to have the heart and have the determination to stick and commitment to stick with it. So I think all of these things, I don't know that teachers can always predict who the dancers are going to be, because I don't think it's a look. I think it is facility connected to education, connected to the amount of work and effort that a dancer is willing to put into it. Mm-hmm. So maybe not the answer that you were expecting, but
I love that. And I think that that's so important and wonderful to hear, coming especially from like a school and company director, that you have that kind of outlook on things, because I think too many young dancers are dismissed just from an early age, kind of like you were saying, and don't continue on because they believe that, the way they naturally are, the way they were born, is not fit for this art form. So it's really refreshing to hear.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Alden.
I was just going to say, I think that's really important, because Hannah will attest to this. I'm not a big person. In fact, I'm very short, and that's part of the problem. That's part of what makes me not a dancer. One of my biggest inspirations, or the people who I never met, was Agnes DeMille. Agnes DeMille took class like forever. She never stopped taking class. And she was constantly, in all of her memoirs, she was a wonderful writer. She wrote a lot. And you all should read her books if you haven't, because especially your interest in doing this, you would be interested in what she had to say. So, I got to know Agnes DeMille a little bit through her writing, although I never worked with her myself. And she constantly talked about how she didn't look like a dancer, and she didn't have the body, and she didn't have, she didn't have whatever. She started dancing late, not that late, but she did start dancing late because her parents didn't really take it seriously. And she took what classes she could get, and she did amazing things for the art form. But I think, like, where would dance be without Agnes DeMille? I mean, and I think that it's not up to us to decide who is worth spending time on and who, we don't know. So anyway.
Yeah, no, I was going to just say it's all very interesting. And I think, like, there are pioneers and forerunners and people like Agnes DeMille that really do create so much positive change. And just because they weren't like the Misty Copelands of the world, they're still very important, and they contributed to your life and your success as a dancer, teacher, director, Yeah. And I think after hearing you talk a little bit more about this, it's just like your whole mission, I think, for the school and the company very much go hand in hand, as you were saying. after spending time with you and working with you and hearing you now talk about it more, it does make more sense to me even now, So just thank you for sharing all your things.
And I think it's really special too, the fact that, someone had such a big influence on your life that never even had like a physical presence. It's like really cool and special thing. Yeah. So I actually think right now is a great time to take a short break. So we will be right back.
Here's a word from our sponsor.
All right, we are back from our little break. And I wanted to ask you, Alden, a little bit about, so you have this other home in upstate New York. So what kind of prompted you to choose to make this decision and teach up there on the weekends to get outside of the city?
So it actually sort of started with our wedding. It's a lot of it is just us getting older and wanting different things as we get older, and there's not a lot of value in the city. Everything is very expensive, and you get an apartment, you don't get a house, you don't get a yard, you don't get anything. So I think that my husband and I have been living this, it feels like a post-college lifestyle for 20 years. We both have very adult responsibilities, but we don't have kids. And so, we can sort of continue just the way we've always been. And so we started looking at wedding venues. This is 10 years ago, almost 10 years ago, 8 years ago, to be specific. So we were looking at, I guess we were looking at venues 9 years ago, looking at venues upstate. We looked at some in the city, but again, there's no value. It's just all expensive. And why should you pay that money if you don't need to pay that money? Especially when it seems kind of obscene. But anyway, so we started looking at places upstate, and it's just gorgeous. And, he grew up in Brooklyn, actually. So he grew up in an apartment, but I grew up in a house. And, I'm a country girl or a city girl, but I'm not a suburbs girl. And that's where I grew up. So I have no interest in living in the suburbs, but we always really enjoyed going to my aunts who lived out on acres and acres of land with horse fields and horses. And, we would go up and during the summer for a week, and we would stay, and we would just go everywhere. And then my sister purchased a property in Pennsylvania, actually not too far from my aunt, my younger sister, mind you, by like 6 years, maybe. Yeah, 6 years. And again, when you're not in New York, you can do that stuff. And so anyway, it was so nice to be outside. So Greg and I had already been wanting to get something in the Hudson Valley, and we've been thinking about it for a while. I had this house in Baltimore. So when I sold this house, when my tenant was moving out, I had a little bit of money for a deposit on something, and it wasn't really enough for anything in the city. I'm sure we could have tried to figure something out, but it wasn't worth it to us. And a lot of it is me driving it, to be honest. And my husband enjoying the things that I'm interested in, but I just he was good in an apartment for the time being. I was getting to feel really suffocated. And I needed more of an adult lifestyle. And so, when we sold this house and we had this money, we started looking. And we looked at the small towns. At first, we thought we were going to do something in a town where it would be accessible to the train and we wouldn't have to buy a car. And then my sister bought this property outside of Gettysburg and had the land. And we let our little dog run loose without a leash. And she was so happy. And I realized that, we have all of that in the city. I can walk around the corner on my way to the train and get coffee. And, I can walk to shopping, and I have a walking lifestyle, and I love my walking lifestyle, but
I love that too. And I was in the city.
Right.
That was a highlight for me. I walked everywhere.
Yeah. And I walk to work every day, and it's great. And I love it. But so, and then we realized that it's going to be expensive to take the train all the time. And it's actually going to, you know, cut into perhaps how often we can go up. And then we're still renting cars to go visit family. It's very expensive to get flights or to get train tickets or to rent a car and pay the tolls between Virginia and New York. Oh my gosh. So we may as well have a car payment and an insurance payment. And, you know, it was biting off more than we had been doing financially, but we're older now. So, you know, we can more easily afford that. So anyway, we were looking, it looked like we were going to have to buy a car. So we did, and we found this house because we looked at lots of properties. I really wanted a farmhouse. I really wanted all the charm, and which sometimes comes with some of the problems too. But I really wanted that. And we looked at a few places and they were all nice and they were all like really reasonably priced. There's no way we'd ever get anything in the city for that amount. And then we found this one little house, and this little house had a barn, and this little barn has a sprung floor. Now, it's not like they weren't selling it or like billing it as a sprung floor, but I walked in and I'm like, yep, they definitely
knew instantly.
some sort of whatever, like lattice work, I don't know what you call it, but whatever they do to spring floors, there was that, and then there was plywood on top, and then it was like smoothed over. There's some sort of weird covering, I don't even know what it is, but it's basically a sprung floor. And I saw this and I was like, oh my gosh,
this is the house. This is the house.
We couldn't believe, I mean, there were problems. It was grimy. Don't get me wrong. It's a fixer. And it's still a fixer. We've done a lot of fixing, but you know, you can't get a contractor these days. So, you know, there's still things that need work, but when you start buying things and, you know, after it's painted and you start bringing your own things in and you clean on a regular basis, and the hole in the bathroom floor, your dad does a blowout patch so that you don't have to worry about critters. You know, things happen, fortunately. But anyway, so we got this house and it had this barn, and I thought, wouldn't it be great if it were like, it could be a dance studio, but I didn't think I was going to do anything with it. Well, then this was December, so it took us 6 months to close. We finally closed December of 2019. So all hell breaks loose in the form of a pandemic. We thought that we would go up there, you know, maybe once a month during the winter and twice a month when the weather was nice, and hopefully every weekend over the summer. But again, the world shut down. So we had our neighbor helped us paint it, and we had beds with nice clean mattresses, and you know, it was a nice place to stay, and I was having to teach remotely. So we were coming up every weekend through the pandemic, and I was teaching here in these empty rooms because we had no furniture yet. We had a couple beds, but you know, more rooms than beds. And it was amazing. And then our neighbors across the street had been in the area for almost 40 years, and they had grandkids, and there was really no dance in the area. And they said, you know, they were teasing, but they were half teasing about me teaching dance classes in the barn. But the thing that pushed me over the edge is when the city said that we could hold classes, but they couldn't be indoors. They could be outdoor classes. And I'm like, so here we are. We have a go bag. Hannah knows about our go bag. Well, we used to take it to
the go bag
park, and it used to be this whole cart, except it was over rough terrain trying to get into the park, and so the wheels were coming off. And anyway, so it was just easier to do a bag, and that is a lot harder than just, you know, teaching in your nice big lawn. We have an acre of land up here, and it's very park-like. So I said, you know what, it's, you know, we could make we made the classes donation based. Up here in Accord, there's a huge, you know, range of incomes, and I gentrification is such a dirty word these days. And it's wonderful to be able to have a place that we can go and we can afford. But I don't want to be the one pushing out people who were here before us or providing services that they can't afford to partake in. So anyway, the class has been donation based. We started them outdoors, but then I got the barn cleaned up. We had to get somebody to come in and like junk everything. And then my neighbor helped me like clean it so that we could use it. It's still very rustic, but you know what? Up here, rustic is in. It's very, everybody loves it. So we've got work planned on the barn, which is amazing. But again, with all the construction delays and whatnot, we just haven't done it yet. But we've got new windows and siding, and we're going to have these big French doors that will open to the outside. So we'll have airflow going in and out. And it's a really nice spot. So because we got in the habit of coming up here, and because I've been able to do classes here, even though, we really only have, because my husband, quite frankly, can work remotely, we still have 2-day weekends, and it's very worth it to us to come up here. And there's a need. There's at Innis, which is like a hotel, and they've got a restaurant, and they're trying to curate a bunch of community activities and events and offerings. They were looking for dance for some of their members, and Shadowlands Theater has an acting program for the kids, and they're bringing in some master class teachers. So I'm supposed to be doing something there in April. So there's opportunity up here because there's need. And it's really nice because I enjoy being up here. And of course, in the city, that's where, most of the professional training is available. And that's where most of the professional dancers live. So, and honestly, I'm so attached to our families and our kids who, are watching these kids grow up. We've had the studio for 7 years, but I was teaching classes for a year ahead of that. And I'm not ready to leave our families, and I love our studio. But it's nice to be able to be two places. And I think that there's also Modern Aqua Depot is up here and like not even 10 minutes away from my property. And they've been doing a lot as far as like artist residencies and that kind of thing. They have an Airbnb in a converted train station. So the baggage room is where the dance studio is. And I guess in between sort of regular Airbnb guests, they bring in dance companies. So it's interesting to see the hub of activity that is happening in the Hudson Valley. And I think, the world is a lot smaller in good ways as well as probably some not so good ways, but because of social media. So it'll be fun to see where this all goes, and it's fun to be a part of it.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's so cool. You're very like entrepreneurial. How do you say that? Entrepreneurial.
Correct. That's correct.
Correct. Because I had never heard of someone really doing this. It's like you have this home base in Brooklyn, and then you also have continued your brand, your studio in another location, and you have people really benefiting from that too. And I think it makes a ton of sense why you go every weekend, especially because Greg is Alden's husband, who she keeps referring to. Greg can work remotely. So it's great. I really love that for you, and I'm glad that it has all worked out.
It truly sounds like the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
It feels like it. I wish I could be here like one more day, because there is a need for more classes here. But it's hard to split myself because the studio in Brooklyn needs me too. And that's where my resources are. That's where my people are. If I'm going to continue or begin again with producing and choreographing and do more of the things I was doing before the pandemic, Brooklyn is the place to be. but it's interesting to have this and to think about, because I never planned on using it like this. I didn't plan on having a dance studio, but it was there, like, and the pandemic sort of, it's had some silver linings. It's stopped a lot of things, and there are a lot of big question marks right now. It's changed things for a lot of people, but it's interesting because I started teaching because of a need, not just because it had this cool feature. But I think everything happens for a reason.
Yeah,
I agree with that. Yeah, that's all wonderful. I guess going forward, I wanted to also kind of ask, so not only do you have Accord and Alden Moves Dance Theater in Brooklyn, but you also have developed your own creative dance brand called Get Moving, and that's also very specific to what you do. Can you talk to that a little bit more? I know personally I have a better understanding of it because I now teach one of the Get Moving classes at the studio, but I would love for you to just talk about it. So that would be great.
So, it all started a long time ago because I've been doing this a long time. I was teaching some dance classes alongside the Pilates when I was a gaucho. And I worked for my friend Laura, who had a dance studio a little bit outside of Baltimore. And I learned a lot about young kids from her, but also my teacher, also Laura, was teaching at Sudbrook Elementary School in their after school program. She ran it. And so my teacher training, I did the Pilates program through what had been Authentic Pilates, and then sort of became, because Romana moved and had her own company, Romana's Pilates. I didn't have anything like that for dance. I wasn't in the education program. I wasn't dance ed. I was performance and choreography, and I needed to know more about teaching. And my Pilates training and training program let me know I needed to know more about teaching dance, that I couldn't just go in and take a piece of paper and say, okay, you want me to do XYZ. And I think there are too many young dancers who get into teaching just because it falls in their lap, and they haven't really been trained to do it, and they don't know, exactly what to do. And yet they've danced enough that they can give a good class. But I think that they don't necessarily go in like knowing what they're doing because they haven't been sort of trained to do this. And having my Pilates background, I understand, like, your body is sort of strung together a certain way. All right. Sometimes people have looser ligaments, and they can be a blessing and a curse. Sometimes people like me have a hypermobile back. Again, blessing and a curse. Every blessing is a curse, and every curse is a blessing. And, you want your students to understand the full spectrum of what that means to them, so that they can tap into all of those blessings that they have, and so that they can work through the challenges that, alignment or movement mechanic tendencies, the way they're strung together, whatever challenges that presents, they want to be able to work through that. So in Get Moving, it's a lot of, there's certain things that we do that are very hands-on, because kids are not going to sit there and listen to you lecture, especially when they're 3 years old. And yet you can give them a lot of information that will literally help shape their bodies or sculpt their bodies so that their bodies are growing in the right direction. Just like if you plant a plant and that plant starts falling over, what are you going to do? You're going to like put the little stick in, and then you're going to tie it with a flower wire to the stick so that it stands up straight, right? And that's essentially what we're doing with these kids, is that, their bodies are typically pretty loose because they're young. Sometimes they're tight in certain places. So you're getting them at an age where they're really a blank canvas, and you're teaching them how to work with their instrument. And I think that at Richmond Ballet, and I think in a lot of programs, you don't get the really experienced dance teachers until you're in ballet 1, which is typically around age 8. And by age 8, those alignment, the things about your alignment, I mean, the movement mechanics that you have are pretty set because your alignment is fixed. And if we can get those kids earlier, and if we can guide their development, that again opens doors for them. And you're also giving them information that they can feel before they can intellectually understand what's happening. And it can be easier than taking, because you get a professional dancer and they're wonderful, but they might have a problem. Maybe it's injury related. Maybe they're having pain here, or maybe, they can lift their leg, or you can lift their leg up to their ear, but maybe they can't lift their leg up to their ear. They can't even kick their leg up to their ear. And the reason is because something is just like slightly off, and it's so small. But those changes make all the difference in the world. So in the Get Moving program, that alignment and how we're shaping their alignment is really important. The other thing is the music choices. I think that I've always had an interest in musical theater. And so that music that is reflective of sort of vintage pop culture, like kids love it. They don't need the digital music that they're listening to today. I guess it serves its purpose, but the thing is, you put on Splish Splash, taking a bath with Bobby Darin, they're going to love that as much and more as putting on something that, was made for kids and that is perhaps a little bit more current. I think there are lots of great kids songs out there, but these days a lot of things are digital. And there's so much music that kids would love. It doesn't occur to people to play it for them. Things like from shows, Good Morning, and Hot, Hot, Hot. And I mean, there's so much music that has so much energy. And the energy and the quality in the music helps teach the kids quality of movement. And it helps guide energy in class. And so the Get Moving structure is put together in a way that you don't have to correct their energy as much. If they need to move, you wear them out so they can sort of be quiet and work quietly in a focused way. And then you have to give them something to move again. And so I guess it's the alignment, it's this class structure, it's the music that we're choosing that maybe they're not hearing every day, but it's really classic music that their parents definitely, know or have heard. And I think the class feels like a party, even though it is very structured.
I'm smiling because that's how it is. The kids act like it's the best thing ever. I say, bring down your blast. Yeah. Oh, I want to take it. Yeah. I have them bring down their treasure box, ask them what's inside, and they have a blast, and we practice all the dance fundamentals, and it's fantastic. It is a party.
Yeah. And we use imaginative things to help guide, what their goals are. But Hannah's talking about the treasure box. That point is like pure imagination. That's the place in class where, are you going through the jungle, or are you going on a mission? And what is it? Are you in the circus? What is it that you're doing? I think that there are some wonderfully imaginative, creative dance classes for kids that don't teach them more than like pliés to bend your legs. And a teacher might say knees over toes, but if the kids don't actually do knees over toes, then it's not necessarily corrected, because there's this assumption that some kids can do it and some kids can't, or the class is too big, it takes too much time. But I found that keeping the classes to like 8 or 9 kids and really giving the kids some like one-on-one focused attention they look for that their entire like dance training and careers. And sometimes when they get older it slows class down a little bit, but I feel like what we lose in terms of that class time, they are gaining in a real intellectual understanding later on. I'm with our like 11 and 12 13-year-olds, we talk about the dancer's toolbox, and we're trying to sort of put a name on these things, these principles that they've been working on since they were little, and helping them to understand that. So when they approach a movement that feels hard, and they do it like it's hard, I'm saying, what do you have in your dancer's toolbox? If this is hard, don't say I'm bad at this, or give it up because you can't do it. Go into your dancer's toolbox, take something out, use it, and see how much more successful it makes you. So again, I sort of have a different way of approaching things, and it's very much a system. And it's really important to me to have teachers involved who, one, understand the system, and two, take the time to learn the system, because it really works, but it works as a system. And if you come in and you don't speak someone's language, if you're a teacher, you're not speaking their language, you're not going to be able to communicate with them. They're not going to understand what you're saying, and you're not going to get from them what you're looking for. So I'm just really lucky to have had, teachers all along the way who are willing to learn my vocabulary, because everybody gets more out of it. And I think that teachers do too. I think that teaching is a really good way to refine your own technique.
Agreed. That's really awesome. And speaking of imagination, just to kind of wrap things up today, can you briefly speak about the Nutcracker and what this looks like for your studio and company? Just tell us a little bit about this tradition you guys have.
So I did the Nutcracker for 9 years with Richmond Ballet. I did Flowers when I was a senior, I guess, but it was too short to fit into the lineup, so I only did the youth performances. Going back to that whole like fitting into a mold thing. But yeah, so I always did it with Richmond Ballet, and it was the highlight of my like every year. It was the best. And it was a time where we got to interact with company dancers and see them in action. And it really elevated the school. And I personally love the Nutcracker. So I love doing it every year. And what's really cool is that originally our Nutcracker was immersive, and it was immersive for, I guess, 6 years until we had a pandemic, and then immersive was not going to work out so well. So I don't know what our Nutcracker will be exactly moving forward. We've really enjoyed the immersive aspect of it. It can be hard, but that was the idea, is that we have these young kids who else but me would put 4-year-olds in a Nutcracker, because really it's going to be like a wedding. They're going to do what they do. They're going to let you practice. But you know what? It's going to be wonderful. Whatever happens is going to be amazing, and it's going to be memorable. And I think that that's really the brilliance in the immersive production, and a lot of that shines through our film productions as well. Last year we did it sort of as a film, filming everybody in pods, and then this past year we did it as a production. We started and stopped a little bit to get kids in and out, to minimize people in the space. But the kids get to work with the company, and not only do they get to work with the company, but they get, and guest artists too, but they get to work with their teachers, and they get to see who their teachers really are. Because everyone in New York is someone. I mean, that's the coolest thing about it, is that your bartender is an actor, and your dance teacher is, rehearsing for other things. And the person playing the piano does all kinds of different gigs, and even, might play on Broadway, sub on Broadway, or have to take time off because they get a Broadway show. And you don't have that everywhere. It's just because, New York's a bigger city, and people are coming to New York to do those things. So I think it's really cool for the kids to see who they're working with. And it provides mentor opportunities for the kids, you know, just accidental mentorship. It helps the kids to get to know other teachers in the school. It helps, I mean, it's really shaped the studio. And it has become as much a part of the families involved, their holiday season, as it was of my family's holiday season growing up. Now, I don't ask people to be there the Saturday after Thanksgiving like we had to do for ballet. You don't have to change your Christmas plans because you have performances all the way up until Christmas Eve. So we haven't taken it quite that far, but you know, we're younger and we're not Richmond Ballet yet, but what the kids are getting is really incredible. And I think that it's really nice for artists too, because I think, you know, we spend so much of our time doing auditions or in class because the rehearsals or the performances and rehearsals for performances are not always a constant for every dancer. And I think that, I mean, for me, working with kids has kept me fresh, and it's kept the things that are important in sight and in mind. And, you know, it keeps things very real. You don't have to put on quite so much. So I don't know if that's exactly what you were looking for, but.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. And I can relate to the Nutcracker. It has held a special place in my heart too over the years. And yeah, it's just always so exciting to hear about and to witness different versions and how each school and studio approaches it. And yeah, thank you so much for sharing. Truly, it has been a pleasure, Alden, to meet you today and to hear about all of these experiences. And yeah,
no, it's as Kristen said, it's really wonderful to have you here, Alden. I of course work with you very closely all the time, so I do know a lot of these things, but I really loved hearing you elaborate on it all. And I just think you have a really positive and great outlook. And so that's why we're really grateful that you were willing to speak on our podcast. So thank you.
Well, I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for tuning into Abun Dance. We appreciate your support. We hope to have PK'd your interest. Feel free to contact us at abundancepodcast5678@gmail.com and give us feedback on what you'd like to hear. That is Abundance without parentheses. Go dance yourself silly. Bye for now.
a special thank you to Richard DiFiore for our lovely podcast tune and Matt Mellish for our cover art.